I'm Les Unverdorben, CEO of AusPath Agency. Together with my esteemed cousin Frank Unverdorben, our Managing Director, we co-founded AusPath, driven by a pressing need, the shortage of skilled nurses in Australia. In the heart of this challenge, we recognise the urgency to act. The aged care sector in Australia is facing a shortfall of nearly 140,000 workers by 2025, with 30 to 35,000 nurses needed each year, according to CEDA. Through our thorough research and discovery, we found that on the other side of the world, numerous talented international nurses dreamt of contributing to Australia's healthcare. However, the path to AFRA registration was riddled with complexities and barriers, making it impossible for many to consider Australia as a career option. That's where AusPath stepped in. We streamlined the AFRA registration process, offering a faster and cost-effective journey for international nurses. Our transitional pathway not only simplifies AFRA registration, but also navigates the complexities of visa requirements, including DAMA and company-specific labour agreements. This streamlined approach ensures international nurses can start their Australian nursing career without unnecessary delays. Our strategic process helps navigate the complex process all the way through to selecting the most appropriate visa. This helps to ensure longevity and dedication from employees for healthcare organisations, leading to permanent residency for employees and retention for employers. Navigating this process correctly will ensure success, but getting it wrong can lead to a disaster. That's why you need an experienced team that knows the process thoroughly, all the ins and outs. The last thing employers want is to go through the whole recruitment and migration process only to have the employees leave after a short time. We also developed an intuitive online portal that connects nurses with employers, seamlessly making the entire process streamlined and efficient. Our approach isn't just efficient, it's also financially empowering. AusPath optimises the costs associated with AFRA registration, enabling nurses to pursue their dreams without financial burdens. With AusPath, international nurses don't just navigate registration, they embark upon a transformative journey. Our pathway enriches careers, ensuring dedicated professionals for employers and fulfilling careers for nurses. Our collaborations with industry leaders like iPass Processing, Lee Care Solutions, AusMed and Christie Migration ensure a constant supply of the world's most dedicated nurses. These partnerships provide our candidates with the best training, resources and support, making them highly sought after professionals. For employers, compliance is crucial, especially in aged care, where the new 24/7 registered nurses and care minutes requirements demand careful attention. AusPath not only meets these staffing needs, but also tackles compliance obligations head on. Our nurses fulfil all employer requirements, easing the burden on training and ensuring quality care delivery. They seek permanent residency and career advancement, making them valuable long-term assets for any organisation. So join hands with AusPath today and be part of a movement that revolutionises healthcare staffing, enhances patient care, empowers careers and fosters global alliances. So register with AusPath now at www.auspath.agency and transform challenges into opportunities.
Hi everyone, good afternoon to all our live viewers here in Facebook. Thank you for your time of being with us here in our information session. Actually, the information session of AusPath every 2 weeks is very unique because AusPath is the only onboarding company providing you information with regards to the desired destination that nurses do really want to go, that is Australia. And there is no other agency that you can find out there who's providing you the free information session, free discussions that will be very helpful for you as you plan on moving and working in Australia as a nurse. And as you know, guys, we have already discussed a lot of information on our previous discussions. And if you haven't checked those information that might be very helpful for you, you can also check out the AusPath Agency's YouTube channel at AusPath Agency. And if you also want to check the previous discussions here in the Facebook page of AusPath, you can also check the Facebook page. And if you haven't registered in their portal, that's really the most important thing that we need to do first in registering the portal of AusPath. So in today's discussion, we are very fortunate to have our very important and invited guest, Sir Neil Dakulan, who is also a Filipino and is currently already he is already in Australia. Joining with me today are our CEO in AUS Path, Sir Les Anferdorben, and our co-founder and managing director, Sir Frank Anferdorben. Sir Frank, would you like to introduce Sir Neil?
Yes, thanks, Rachel. It's great to see everyone here again today, and we're very privileged and blessed to have the Reverend Deacon Neil Dakulan here. Reverend Neil is an ordained minister in the Catholic Church as a deacon, and he is very instrumental now in Australasia in helping our team provide you, the employees and the candidates coming to Australia looking for employment in Australia, with pastoral care and advocacy services. Neil has an extensive history and background in HR, and I'll get Neil to give a bit of a background of his history in HR and maybe how he came to Australia as well, and his history there. But Neil is quite experienced with all HR matters, both in the Philippines and now in Australia, and is a welcome inclusion and member of the AusPath team. So take it away, Neil.
Thanks a lot, Frank. Thank you. And also thank you, Rachel. Also, Les, thanks. I've been practicing human resources for the last 10 years. So if you notice, I've got the end of my name, there's a Mari. That means a professional member of the Australian Human Resources Institute. I've been there for the last 10 years. And the reason why I'm here to you today is to talk about something to do with choosing your employment here in Australia. When you're in Australia, we will give you the confidence that you are actually supported. So today I'm going to discuss about the National Employment Standards. And there are two questions that we need to resolve. So what is this National Employment Standards? When you say employment standards, talk about sick leave, annual leave. What is the standard here in Australia? And how do these standards apply to me as an employee in an Australian setting? So if you come to Australia, because there are 13 standards, which standards apply to you as an international employee? So we will look at that. Now let's talk about the National Employment Standards. What are National Employment Standards? Thanks, Rachel. Can you please go to the next slide, Rachel? So the National Employment Standards, the National Employment Standard is the minimum or basic entitlements to employees in Australia. So when you say minimum, this is like if you are working here in Australia, it should be there in your employment. You should enjoy these rights as an employee here in Australia. So it's the minimum, it's the basic requirements. And we call this the NES, or the National Employment Standards. So the National Employment Standards provide for compliance and enforcement of the Fair Work Act 2009. So in Australia, employee relations, industrial relations is governed by Fair Work Act 2009. We call the Act, okay? So the NES is actually under the Fair Work Act. Thanks, Rachel. Can we go to the next slide, please? Now, the Act establishes the Fair Work Commission and the Fair Work Ombudsman. There are two things here. The Fair Work Ombudsman, they make sure that these laws are being implemented by the employers. The Fair Work Commission, this is like a national tribunal. If you get complaints on your contract, if, for example, you feel like you're underpaid or there's a bullying that happens, you can file that case at Fair Work Commission. They will look at that. Now, so as I mentioned before, currently there are 13 minimum standards as laid down by the Act. But out of these 13, 11 applied for the international workers here in Australia. And with the National Employment Standards, it is expected that all employers must comply with these standards. Meaning to say, if some employers don't comply with these standards, they will have a visit from the ombudsman, and in some cases they get penalties. So all employers know about these standards, and they know that they need to do this. Now let's talk about the standards. Now the first standard is, we talk about the maximum weekly working hours. In Australia, the maximum weekly working hours is 38 hours per week. 38 hours per week, meaning to say that's 7.6 hours per day. Times 5 days, you'll get 38 hours per week. You have there plus additional reasonable hours. Meaning, this means that the hours, if it's beyond 38 hours, it should be reasonable, meaning to say it does not affect your health, it does not affect your family. It should be within reason that you are getting additional hours, because you can actually say no to these additional hours if you already comply with the 38 hours per week. But sometimes, due to operational requirements, you might be asked to do these additional reasonable hours. But then again, there you go, the discussion. Now, when we talk of the hours here in Australia, the lunch break is generally 30 minutes. This is not paid. That's why you get 7.6 hours. And the paid breaks is actually 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the afternoon. Those are paid breaks. So if you look at 7.6 hours, that's actually 7 hours and 36 minutes. So if you start at 9 o'clock, generally people finish at 5 p.m. But if you look at the law, because it's under 7.6, it's actually 5 minutes, 5 hours, and it's actually 7 hours. You finish actually at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, plus 6 minutes, that's 5:06. But the general practice here is that
most nurses in
Yes.
healthcare, it's part of the culture. It's just an established rule that most nursing shifts, as what we call the day shift or a morning shift,
You
is
have 10
generally
hours.
from 7 a.m. till 3 p.m. That's the usual 8-hour or 7.6-hour working shift. The times in there. So an office worker in Australia will generally work 9 to 5. Most healthcare workers, for some reason, it works 7 till 3, and the night shift is often a 10-hour shift. It's usually from say 11 o'clock or something to 7 or 10 p.m. till 7 a.m. It's the usual night shift, and then 3 p.m. till 10 p.m. or 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. is the usual afternoon shift, and that can vary. That can be like from 2 o'clock to 10 o'clock as well. But that just gives enables for some shift crossover, and it enables for the handover at the end of the shift where all staff are present. That's just for the general feel and the general occupational hours for healthcare in Australia.
Thanks for pointing out that, Frank. Because nurses here in Australia, they work usually 10-hour shifts per day, and so most of them work like 4 days a week. But if you work 5 days a week, that means that's still not illegal, but that again needs to be discussed with your employer, because your employer will discuss these hours anyway. So thanks a lot for that. Let's go to the next slide. Standard 2, there's the request for flexible working arrangements. Again, due to family issues or personal issues, you can actually request for flexible working arrangements. Now, there are certain eligibility on this, like for example, in the case of women, if there's pregnancy, for example, you can request for flexible working arrangements. If you are a parent and you're taking care and you have the responsibility of a school-age child, because usually schools here, they start around 8:15, finished at around 3:15. And so somebody needs to pick up the child, or else you need to bring your child to childcare, which costs so much here in Australia. So because of that, you can request for flexible working arrangements. And if you are also 55 years old or older, you can also do that. This is something new. Experiencing family or domestic violence, that is a big thing here in Australia. If you're experiencing that, you can request for flexible working arrangements. And if you're caring or supporting an immediate family who is experiencing family or domestic violence. If you're supporting someone, maybe a relative who's experiencing family or domestic violence, you can also request for flexible working arrangements. Now, generally here in Australia, you can have this request for flexible working arrangements if you've done 12 months of work here. So, uh, but in some cases, especially if it's in an enterprise agreement, if it's stipulated there that at the get-go you can request for flexible working arrangements, then you need to know if it's under that enterprise agreement. Okay, but generally, flexible working arrangements, you need to have at least 12 months of work in a company where you are to request for flexible working arrangements. But generally, Australian employees are they're open to discussion, because usually when it affects you and your family and your kid, and you're having a hard time, or you're working but you're spending so much on childcare, that would be very difficult. That would be very difficult for you. It's not
One
cost
of
effective.
one of the really interesting things you mentioned there, Neil, in regards to enterprise agreements, or sometimes called EBAs, which is enterprise bargaining agreements. An employer can have a special contract of employment that governs as an umbrella contract with certain terms and conditions, called the agreement or the enterprise bargaining agreement, that covers all employees under that organisation. The stipulations of the enterprise agreement must be that any enterprise agreement must have as a minimum the national employment standards, or must look to exceed those standards.
Yes.
All right. So this is a bare minimum that you, as an employee in Australia, will receive. All right. So just because you get a job offer of employment and you see there, and AusPath comes to you and says, and the employer would like you to sign this employment contract. The employment contract is part of an enterprise agreement. Just be aware that the national employment standards are the bare minimum. In most cases, the employment offer of contract of employment will exceed those standards. Okay.
Yeah. So thanks again for pointing that out.
I have a question. You mentioned earlier about the enterprise agreement. So just for the information of our audience as well, they might not be able to understand what is an enterprise agreement. So can we probably explain further to them what is this employment enterprise agreement that you were mentioning?
Okay, Rachel, the enterprise agreement is like a collective bargaining agreement in the Philippines. If you have a union, remember your union represents you, and they make sure that you have the most benefits. So in the Philippines we call it collective bargaining agreement, but in Australia this is called enterprise bargaining agreement. Like, for example, an example would be nurses. Nurses, they have the ANMF. The ANMF has this enterprise agreement that they work with the government, make sure that the nurses enjoy these certain benefits and that there's salary increase every so often. So it does not put them at the not at the mercy of, like, they're not earning so much that they will leave the work. So basically the enterprise agreement is like the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement that we have. Is just a different wording here, and as Frank called it, it's actually an EBA here, enterprise bargaining agreement. I hope that
It may
sounds.
also be what is known as a company-specific labour agreement, or CSLA. That comes into play a lot within healthcare as well. So just be aware there's certain terms, but company-specific enterprise bargaining agreement, very similar to the collective bargaining agreements.
Thank you for that information, Frank and Neil.
Yeah. And standard 3, we have the parental leave and related entitlements. This applies to all employees. This parental leave applies to all employees, whether you're full-time, part-time, or casual, if they have completed at least 12 months of continuous service. And each parent can take up to 12 months of unpaid parental leave, or up to 24 months if their employer agrees. Now, the paid parental leave here in Australia is actually 10 days. 10 days for the mom, 10 days for the dad. It can be continuous, it can be broken. It depends on how you discuss it with your employer. Now, you can use other leaves, but generally, when people take the parental leave, and if you don't have any more annual leave, you can still use your annual leave. But if the wife needs to stay at home for 12 months, which is usually the case here in Australia, the question is how will you survive? How will you survive? It's a difficult thing. Most Filipinos who come here to Australia after 3-4 months, they go back to work. But by law, if you've been working here for 12 months, you can actually avail of it for up to 12 months. Yeah. But the question is, how will you get the money? It's different for when you are an international worker compared to a PR here. If you are a PR here, there is the Centrelink who will help you. There are parental payments given to the PR, and that's another motivation for the nurses to go get
Just,
that PR.
just to be aware that under the different stipulations of the visas as well, you are expected to actually be working during a certain period of time as well. So there may be some regulations in regards to the different visa. If you're coming under a 482 visa or a 494 visa, and you're expected to work a set number of hours. So just be aware that, especially for the women, if you do decide to go on maternity leave, there may be some conditions in regards to your visa that you'll need to talk to a migration agent about.
Yeah,
But then I don't think that Filipinos will also like take so much time on their leave, because the mentality of the Filipino,
Yes.
whichever country they go to, they always want to work. Every time has to be. In as
I
much as
agree.
possible, there should be a
I
work.
agree, Rachel. I agree, because there are actually moms after like 1 month, 1.5 months, they go back to work right away, and if they're fit to go back to work, there should be no problem with that one. So, but yeah, thanks Frank for pointing that out. Now, annual leave. Everybody will love this. Australia has very generous annual leave compared to what we have in the Philippines. An employee can accumulate actually up to 4 weeks of paid annual leave for each year of service. So this means for every 3 months, if you're working full time for 3 months, you accumulate 1 week annual leave. And if you want to take that right away during that year, you can do that. Now, 4 weeks of paid annual leave, that's actually a lot. Now, the usual issue here in Australia for nurses is that their annual leave, they accumulate it so much. I know of a nurse who's got like 12 weeks of annual leave, and they are sometimes the employers would force them to take a leave. But
So a
what I
lot of the
what I
time you'll
basically
see in Australia, especially in aged care, most of the employers now, as far as it's just expected now that you're going to find a lot of nursing positions now will be by default a 5-week annual leave now.
Yeah.
It's just something that we've just seen sort of creep into the industry over the last couple of years. But generally, probably 4 weeks is expected. But don't be surprised if you receive a job offer of employment through AusPath where the employer is offering you 5 weeks. And again, if you're working full-time, that annual leave can actually be accrued and keep on going through. And as Neil said, to a certain extent, your employer may actually require you to do one of two things. And Neil, would you like to say that? Either take the leave or get cashed
go
out?
ahead. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this is the usual case. Most nurses have excessive annual leave. They don't take leave of absence, and if it accumulates more than 8 weeks, then the employers can step in and say you need to take your annual leave. I know of some nurses who got like 10, 12 weeks of annual leave accumulated, and so that's why the employers talked to them and said that you need to take this leave because that is just too
Really
much.
really not healthy. We know that you want to work. We know that you're earning a good income, and you're wanting to. A lot of Filipinos will come to Australia and they'll save their money and send money back home, and it's the expectation. But thing is, you must look after your health.
True.
Right, your physical health, your mental health, your psychological health is really important. And if you're suffering because you're not taking enough breaks and you're not having enough rest, you're not helping anyone. You're certainly not helping yourself if you're going to have burnout or feeling run down. So again, it's part of your own personal care. Take your annual leave. You plan for your breaks, plan for your holidays, but make sure that you don't have excessive amounts of annual leave piling up all the time, because that in itself can be a problem.
In terms of the issues that the nurses suffer here in Australia, as Frank pointed it out, mental health is a big thing. Remember, you are in a foreign country. You might have friends, but they're not your family. I mean, your friends sometimes can become your family, but mental health is very important. That's why annual leave is there. That's the reason why the annual leave is there. Thanks. Let's go to the next slide. Standard 5, sick and carers leave and compassionate leave. Sick leave and carers leave, that's 10 days each year for full-time employees and pro rata for part-time employees. So if you're part-time employees, it will be less than the 10 days each year. But yeah, sick leave, you can take that with the notice that you will ring your employer. Sometimes the employer would require you to really ring them rather than just send a text message. It depends on again, your arrangement with your employer.
Neil, can you explain nowadays, because we're living in a digital society, and a lot of people will either text in or email or ring in sick, for example. What is the I don't know if you can tell us what the legal requirement is. I believe is if you are taking more than 2 days sick leave at any given point of time, you need to provide a doctor's certificate.
Yes.
Or is it for just 1 day, or is it 2 days?
Usually,
what are the rules?
Usually what happens is the current practice, if you're taking a leave of absence or sick leave for 1 day and it comes from a weekend, for example, you had a weekend Sunday and then you're working on a Monday, or you're off on a Friday and you're not working on a weekend. Again, I'm just assuming not just for the nurses, okay? If you're working Monday to Friday, if it's at the start of the week, at the end of the week, if it's 1 day, some companies would require you to have medical certificate. But as a rule, 1 day you don't need a medical certificate or a statutory declaration. But 2 days, you need to provide a medical certificate for 2 days, because again, that is usually the requirement.
In relation to this topic as well, Frank, what happens, and Neil, what happens to the employee, or what will be the actions of the employer if ever the employee becomes so sick that worst case scenarios, because some employees might
Well, if they
they
extend
need to
more than
be
10
admitted in
days,
the ICU, for example, in cases like that.
Okay, so there's a few things for consideration with that. Number one is the reason why they are sick. Okay, if it is because they've contracted an illness of their own accord, then that is what your 10 days are for. Now, the employer, to a certain extent, can allow for unpaid leave days over and above what those days are. All right, so we have unpaid carers leave. They can have unpaid sick leave. The other consideration there is if the employer is unwell due to a work-related injury or work-related situation, then in Australia we have what's known as WorkSafe, or it's like the employers must have insurance to pay your wage if you cannot work because of an injury or an illness sustained whilst you were at work. In some instances, that can also be on the way to work, on the way home. And there are other legal instruments in regards, if you are driving, your car insurance, your driver's license insurance in Australia, you will actually have work insurance as well. But if you are in a position where you have used up all of your sick leave and you have an extensive leave of absence, the employer can then stand you down. All right, so they will generally bring you in to discuss the reasons. But if you are seen to be in a condition unfit for work, and again, that could be no fault of your own, the employer can consider to actually stand you down there as well. So again, that is why one of the requirements is that you actually have, as an international sponsored employee coming to Australia, that you have your personal health insurance, and that will actually cover for some contingencies there as well. All right. So again, making sure that you have personal health insurance is a mandatory requirement for working in Australia. So there will be some benefit of that healthcare insurance that will cover you for a certain period of time. But, if you are in a position where, God forbid, say you were diagnosed with cancer or something like that, well, you're probably not going to be working whilst you're in either rehabilitation or getting treatment, or you may consider, if you are under a visa, you may want to go back home. So there's a few different things in there, but that is where human resources, HR, management, isn't just purely for the employers, it's for the employees as well. A HR manager of the employer that you go to will have that compassionate understanding for your individual situation. So in all instances, make sure that you have the discussion, open and frank discussion with your employers if you feel that you're in a position where you're going to have an extended leave of absence.
Thank you for that information, Frank.
Yeah, as Frank did mention, there was work cover, for example, if you sustain an injury at work, and because of that, you cannot work. You can be under the work cover. Okay, but I'm not really sure, Frank, 100% for the international students. How does work cover work for them?
All employers are required to provide work cover for every employee. So it doesn't matter if they're under a student visa or they're under a 482 international sponsored visa. If they are working and they're working, getting a salary, getting the superannuation, for example, an employer must provide that work cover insurance for all casual, part-time and full-time employees. That is their own business insurance as well, which is a requirement under the Australian Securities Act for companies and for work cover for all businesses as well in Australia.
Also, one of the best practices here in Australia, Rachel, is what we call the employee assistance program. If the employee is struggling with something, either mentally, problems at home, and he or she needs to talk about it, there's an employee assistance program which is totally confidential, which the employers wouldn't know. Usually it's part of the additional service that they have, because sometimes most of those who got really sick would tap into the employee assistance program. So take note, this 10 days applies for your personal sick leave.
Quite often in Australia as well, Neil, you'll find that there is that extra service and support through the employee superannuation scheme. Most of the superannuation schemes will actually offer that level of employment. So if you go back through, for example, AusPath recommends Catholic Super. We don't have any financial benefit in saying that at all, but it's just one of our stakeholder partners that we have links to on the AusPath website. So by all means, have a look at your superannuation schemes, because they will usually include that type of care in your policy for no extra charge.
Thanks again, Frank. So as I mentioned before, so sick leave, this is for your personal sick leave. What is this carer's leave? Carer's leave, for example, if you have your family with you, if your husband is sick or if your child is sick and you need to be there for your child, this is when you can tap into the carer's leave. You don't have to be the one who's sick, but you're the one caring for the one who's sick. That's what you call a carer's leave. So that's sick leave plus carer's leave. That's 10 days per year. You can have an extra unpaid carer's leave up to 2 days. Up to 2 days. That's what the Fair Work says. But then again, when you have the enterprise agreements, it can be more. Compassionate leave. Compassionate leave is actually if you have death in the family, miscarriage, something happened in the family. This is like immediate family. You have a leave of up to 2 days. You can take these 2 days either continuous or you can break it down into one day here and one day there. It depends on your discussion with the employer. So compassionate leave happens when somebody, for example, in your family died or somebody was like is terminally ill, like or if there is a miscarriage, for example, of the wife and it's the husband who's a nurse, you can take that compassionate leave. You can have that too, and it's a great thing that it's there because it's additional. At least you get extra 2 days. You're getting paid while not being at work. So that's how Australia treats its workers. Standard 6, family and domestic violence leave. Again, family and domestic violence leave. This is a bit new. It applies to all employees, full-time, part-time, and casual. Employees are entitled to 10 days of leave each year. So, as what the law says, this is the only time wherein casual employees can actually tap into family and domestic violence leave, because generally the leave is open to full-time and part-time. But this one again, if somebody has problems with the family and then there's domestic violence involved, so there will be documentations, whether it's a report from the police or from a counselor. Somebody is going through that, then HR would ask for these documentations. And again, there's each employee is entitled to 10 days of leave each year. So that's for family and domestic violence leave. The next one, community service leave. This is just for information because this doesn't apply. This doesn't apply to our international workers. But in here in Australia, we have the community service leave. For example, if you're volunteering with the fire, which is CFA, or with RSPCA, which is something to do with the animals, you can take this community service leave. And also, if you are on jury duty, like you'll be part of.
Once you have PR.
What's that, Frank?
It will apply once they have PR.
Yes.
Residency, but yeah, not until then. Yep.
Yeah, but not until then. So let's go to standard 8.
Let's pause for a little while, Neil and Frank. So let me just also invite our viewers who are with us in this information session that if you haven't registered via the portal of the AusPath, you can register at www.crm.auspath.agency so that the AusPath onboarding company can provide you information as well and can present you to the employers that they do have. And also you can visit their website at www.auspath.agency for more information. They actually have they have written a lot of blogs that will be helpful for you as well. So take time to visit their website and check those blogs because I know that it will be very beneficial for you. Okay, let's move on to standard number 8.
The long service leave. An employee is entitled to LSL in accordance with the pre-modernized award. Okay, I have it in an asterisk because again, one of the instruments here that we use in Australia and their Fair Work Act is the awards. We call it awards. For example, if you are a nurse, there is an award for the nurses called Nurses Awards. So the nurses awards lay down all of these stipulations under the NES, the National Employment Standards. But again, as I mentioned, these are just the basic requirements. So for every work here in Australia, for every work that you do, there is an award that governs the kind of work that you do. If, for example, you're a butcher, there's an award that relates to the butcher. If you are a worker in community service, there's an award that relates to community service. Seldom where there are work that's award free, meaning to say it doesn't fall under any award, but it does happen. It does happen. So when we mention here of awards in Australia, it's actually an industrial tool that governs that's the stipulations of NES in your specific work. Okay, I'll give you an example for long service leave. For instance, in Victoria, if you're in Victoria, long service leave accrues a rate of 1 week for every 60 weeks of continuous service. Generally, the practice is for every 52 weeks, which is a total that's equal to 1 year. 1 year is 52 weeks. Usually, workers accumulate 1 week of long service leave. Again, in Victoria, they can qualify for LSL after 7 years of continuous service. In some cases, there are actually 5 years. After 5 years of continuous service, you've got like 5 weeks. You got 5 weeks of long service leave. You can actually tap into that too. So,
And this is over and above
yeah,
what your annual leave is. So
yes,
after, say, 7 years of continuous service, for those 7 years, you've been having your 4 or 5 weeks annual leave. At the end of that 7-year period, then you have another additional 5 or 6 or 7 weeks that you can take as well.
Again, that's the beauty of the system we have here in Australia, because there's so much work here to be
That's
done.
fully
Yeah.
paid leave as well. Yeah.
There's so much work here to be done, but we make sure that you take your leave so you can enjoy also your life, not just working, but also enjoying it with your family, visiting across Australia, or you might want to go interstate, or you want to go back to the Philippines. You can tap into this again.
This is
For
why
those
we have a saying in Australia: we work to live, not live to work.
precisely, we should have that break, Frank. So that's the long service leave.
Neil, I'd like to read the one that was provided to us by Les. We have total non-working days. So for weekends, it's 104 days. And then public holidays, 10 days. Annual leave, there will be 20 days. Sick leave,
Yes,
10 days.
yes.
Total non-working days will be 144 days
Out of
plus long
350.
service leave.
Yeah.
That
Wow.
generous.
Wow.
So
Thanks a lot, Liz.
if you go to one of the previous webinars that we did, I think it was the webinar where we talked the difference between metropolitan and regional working, and I actually touched on this, or it might have been superannuation, to be honest, where we said that in Australia, you can potentially have more than a third of the year in downtime. So it is a great destination to work. Not that you want to just sit back and do nothing, but you are very well looked after when you come to Australia to work as a professional.
Yes, that's a great thing. Thanks for pointing that out, Liz, too. Public holidays. Yeah. Okay. So public holidays, these holidays apply to full-time and part-time employees only. Now the problem with this, if you're a full-time employee, you got no problem with that. The holiday you will always have that. You'll always be paid the public holiday. But the problem is this: what if the public holiday falls on a Monday and you're not working on a Monday because you are a part-time employee? Will you be paid on that Monday? No, you will not be paid on that Monday because you're a part-time employee. Okay, but if, for example, that public holiday, if you're working on a Monday and you're not working on a Wednesday, and the holiday is on a Monday, of course you'll be paid on that Monday. You will not be working. If you'll be working, well, that will be double your pay. That's what happens here when you work. full time. Now, if you're a casual employee, public holidays don't apply to the casual employees. And again, as mentioned by Liz a while ago, there are around 8 to 10 public holidays per calendar year. In Melbourne alone, there's like 2 extra public holidays. One is the AFL, which has something to do with our footy. I think it's in September. Frank, is
Yep.
it?
Yep,
September.
that's right. Yep.
And
One
then
day
we
is
have
they say. And then
yeah.
the other one is the first Tuesday of November. We
Which
have
is
a day off for a horse race, the Melbourne
the
Cup.
Melbourne Cup.
Probably, I think maybe the Kentucky Derby or something might be the only other horse race in the world where you might get a day off just for a horse race. But it's been a local tradition since the early 1900s. So if you live in Melbourne, you work in Melbourne, and you're full time, you're going to get the first Tuesday of November off every year as a holiday.
There are a lot of activities in Melbourne. If you happen to be in Melbourne, there's that, and then you've got the Formula One. Of course, there's no holiday in Formula One. You have the Australian Open in January. Of course, that's not a holiday too. But then again, if you are in
racing carnival, yep, that's right.
Yeah, the Spring Racing Carnival in November. So you have all of these things going on. But yeah, there are other 2 extra public holidays in Melbourne aside from those other holidays. Which are
the normal ones are always there: Christmas, Easter,
Christmas,
Good
New
Friday.
Year.
We have the King's birthday holiday now. The Queen died, but and then we also have what we call Australia Day, Anzac Day, and Labor Day.
So we have those 8 every year plus 2 others, the public holidays.
Neil, a question. How do we categorize if an employee is a full-time worker, a part-time worker, or a casual employee? Just for the information of our viewers.
Okay, you're a full-time employee if you're working 30 hours per week and it's stipulated in your contract that you're a full-time employee. Because sometimes full-time employees can be contractors. Like you're contracted only to work for 3 months or 6 months or 12 months. But full-time employees, this is an ongoing thing. If you're a part-time employee, it's less than 38 hours per week. Usually, we call it an FTE, like a full-time equivalent FTE. For example, if it's 0.8, that's like 4 days a week. If it's 0.6, that's like 6 days a week. So like you work, 0.6 is like 3 days a week, and 0.8 is like 4 days a week. So some people are working here part-time by reason of they have some family or they have to take care of their kids. So we have part-time employees. We have several part-time employees here in Australia, mostly women too, part-time because of their domestic duties. It also applies to men, but mostly men. They still do a lot of full-time work. And the casual employees, that employee wherein you are like on an on-call basis, but your pay is actually higher than a full-time and a part-time employee. Now, let's look at the federal minimum wage in Australia. By 1st of July this year, the minimum wage is $24.10. $24.10. That's the federal minimum. Okay? That's for the lowest earners. Usually nurses and caregivers, they earn more than that based on the award that they fall under. Okay? It's not $24.10. But if you're a casual worker, and you don't have specific days or specific shifts during the week wherein you just you are being called by your employer to work certain days or certain hours, and sometimes they might give you certain days or certain hours to do your work. But when you're a casual worker, because you don't have sick leave and annual leave, your pay is, you have an extra 25% over and above your pay. So if it's $24.10 per hour as of 1st of July 2010, which is the federal minimum wage, as a casual worker, you get another 25%. So another 25% of 24, that's another $6, probably around $30, 30 plus something dollars per hour. Okay, again, this is for the minimum wage earners. Nurses, caregivers, they're not minimum wage earners here in Australia. They earn more than the minimum wage earners.
Most carers most carers will be on roughly about $32 an hour, and most nurses will be on $45 an hour and above, up to 50 to 53, depending on their years and level of experience.
Yeah.
But that is the base rate. You also get penalty rates, which is a different multipliers. If you work afternoon shift or night shift, or as Neil identified, if you're working on public holidays as well, you could get 1.25, 1.5, or double time as well. Twice the amount of the base rate pay.
So yeah, if you're a nurse here in Australia, you'll be given like level 1 or level 2 or level 3 every year. Your pay goes up because your skills go up. So that means your pay goes up too. You will have that discussion with your employer. You might start off with a certain pay. Let's just say usually our pay here is annualized. When you say annualized, it's per year. Let's just say if you're getting 90,000 a year. If you're getting 90,000 a year this year, next year it might be more than 90,000. It will be more than 90,000 a year next year. Because usually there's a pay increase every. If we go by the law, it's every 1st of July. There's a pay increase. But sometimes if you have again an enterprise bargaining agreement, they have certain dates there that may not coincide with our 1st of July 2024, which the Fair Work Commission sets. It's the Fair Work Commission who sets this national minimum wage. Okay, standard 10, superannuation, or commonly called super. Not everybody in the Philippines know this, but superannuation is very important. As far as I can remember, we have SSS and GSIS in the Philippines. We do have that. But here we have...
As regular viewers of our webinars will be aware, we've recently done a comprehensive session on superannuation that people can go to our YouTube page or our Facebook page and watch the replay of that. But as we know from the 1st of July this year, all employees that receive the superannuation will have 11.5% over and above their salary put aside for them and paid directly into a superannuation fund. That is a compulsory contribution that the employers must make over and above an employee's wages. All right, and there's certain stipulations on the superannuation. Again, please go to our website and view the comprehensive discussion and webinar on superannuation. But very quickly, what the superannuation is there is for your retirement. So if you are in Australia and you're working, you are entitled to superannuation, and that is put aside for you until the age of 67, which is in Australia, that is the retirement age. If you are working under an employment contract or under a visa in Australia, say you were working in Australia for 4 years, and then you decided you wanted to go back to the Philippines, you can cash out that superannuation. So say you're on $100,000 a year as an experienced registered nurse, and you have received $40,000, $50,000 bonus as your superannuation. Yes, you can cash that out and return back to the Philippines, but you're never coming back to Australia again to work. It's one and done. All right. So the idea is this is for your retirement.
Yeah.
All right. So if your goal is to come to Australia and have permanent residency in Australia, well, that superannuation is a contribution put aside for you, and that receives compounding interest every year as well. Or from 1st of July this year, every time you get paid, there is a contribution made into your superannuation account, and that will grow, and it's a compounding growth. So it's like a maturation fund, working fund, and that can be, say, if you're coming to Australia as a 30-year-old, well, you're going to have 37 years worth of superannuation. That's going to be quite a substantial amount after 37 years of compounding interest, where every time you get paid by your employer, you're going to get another 11.5% automatically put aside for you. You don't even see that. You don't even look. You can't have access to that. It's just put aside for you. You have your superannuation fund in Australia, and then when you retire, you have a very nice nest egg.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that list. Again, this is part of long-term plan of Australia to keep the employees here working in Australia, because that is really good. Having superannuation, really, as Liz mentioned too, if ever you decide to go back home to the Philippines, that's your money. You can bring that home with you. Standard 11, notice of termination and redundancy pay. Written notice must be given to employee when terminated. Usually, if someone is terminated, if you've been working for 1 year, there's usually a 1 week notice. If you're 45 years old and above, and you've been working in the company for at least 2 years, you'll get another 1 week notice. We don't want that to happen. The notice of termination. um, there's a lot of solutions rather than going towards the termination, because again, we have Fair Work Commission. The Fair Work Commission will resolve the issues if, for example, the employee and the employer cannot resolve the issue. But then again, it's as an employee, you cannot just be terminated on the spot because I don't like your face. No, it doesn't work that way here in Australia. There are notices. And before you even have that notice, there should be ground for terminations, not just because I don't like you. There should be grounds for
An
termination.
employer can also not just make a person redundant; they must make the position redundant. That
Yes.
means that if they make you redundant and get rid of you, then they
Then hire
cannot
another one.
employ somebody else in that position again because of the position is made redundant. All right, so it's very unlikely if you are a good worker and the employer is not insolvent or becoming bankrupt, they're not going to terminate your employment.
Again, redundancy is not very common back home in the Philippines, but redundancy happens only when your position is not anymore available, or the employer becomes bankrupt and terminates their employment. That's it. Standard
slide.
12. The standard 12 is quite straightforward. This means that the provision of Fair Work information statement must be provided to all the employees, whether you are full-time or part-time. This Fair Work information statement must be forwarded, must be given to the employee. Now, I will not discuss about the casual employment because casual employment does not apply to our international workers. But this Fair Work information statement, it's like, I don't know, 1 or 2 pages maybe. It will give you the whole summary of your right as an employee here in Australia, because your rights are protected here in Australia. Okay. Thank you. And number 13, we took out number 13. It has something to do with casual conversion. That's the 13th one, but it's not there. So when you secure a job in Australia as a nurse, caregiver, or other work under the skilled occupations list, you are protected by law, the Fair Work Act 2009, and hence your knowledge on fair work aids in your confidence to do your best as a skilled worker here in Australia. You don't think that somebody dodgy will be behind your back sneaking up on you, and then they will lose your job and you got no one here in Australia. No, it doesn't work that way. When you come to Australia and you sign the letter of offer, when you sign the agreement that you are an employee, you are protected by that agreement. And if something happens, you can always go somewhere. Again, the Fair Work information statement, the one that I mentioned in Standard 12, it should give you some links where to go. In Australia, again, we have the Fair Go system here. The Fair Go system is actually it's like a social belief in Australia that everybody must be treated equally and with fairness. That's Fair Go. So if somebody tells you that you need that there should be a fair go, that means to say that you should be treated equally and with fairness. If you don't have a fair go, that means you can go to Fair Work Commission if there's no fair go for you in your employment. And for more information, you can go to fairwork.gov.au or you can Google National Employment Standards. There are a lot of information there in National Employment Standards. The one that I presented today are just the basic information that applies when you come to Australia. Because just like me, when I came here back in 2005, I was a scholar here in 1998. When I was a scholar here in 1998, I was working as as a cleaner, casual work. And I didn't even know as a casual how much should I be paid, because the payment here is every 2 weeks generally. Seldom you'll be paid here on a monthly basis. Every 2 weeks you'll have your pay. But if you don't get your pay after 2 weeks, what happens here? Where's my pay? Pay should come every 2 weeks, and then you should have your pay slip. There's no way wherein you get your pay without the pay slip. Again, that's part of the law, that you need your pay slip and you get your pay every 2 weeks. If you want more information on this, please go to fairwork.gov.au or you can Google the National Employment Standards. The standards.
On your pay slip in Australia by law, it will have a few different things. Number one, it will have the name and the title of the organisation. It will have your name and your position, the hours, the number of hours that you worked, and the rate of pay of that work. It will also have how many hours that you have accrued in annual leave, and sometimes it will also show you how many hours that you have left or accrued in sick leave. Your payslip should also always have the amount of the contribution put aside for superannuation. All right, so this is part of the Australian work standards dictated by Fair Work Government Australia. The employment conditions and the standards there should have theirs so that you are always aware on a legal documentation being that pay slip of all your entitlements and what you've actually been paid for. All right, so all employers must comply with this when paying their employees, that they actually provide a comprehensive pay slip, and that information must be made on demand to the employer at any time if required. All right, so that's your assurance of a fair go in Australia.
I find this information very helpful, Neil, and thank you really for the discussion. Because, employees here in the Philippines will also need to know, and this information will be coming from the HR, what will be my rights as an employee. Now, AusPath Agency is providing this information free to all our live viewers and to those nurses there who are interested of going to Australia. So I think this discussion is very helpful for them. It will be very important that they really have to know what are the minimum basic rights that they have as an employee once they will already start working there as a nurse in Australia. And thank you really for the wealth of information that you have provided. Sir Les, would you kindly inform our viewers regarding the Platinum package that AusPath can provide to all our members?
Unmute myself there, Rachel. Thanks for the question. We have quite a number of nurses that have taken up the Platinum package now because of the advantages there, not only with having their CV professionally edited, if that's required, but also they get to upload a professional video and we create them a script for that as well. But of all of the benefits inside the Platinum package, which are the discounts, of course, with iPass processing, NCLEX review, with the OSCE review, the CPD points, with AusMed, all of the modules there, 1,275 modules there. You get 1 year free access to that. That alone is worth probably 4 times what the extra cost is for the Platinum package. Of course, we've got to charge a little bit of a cost for that, but we do that basically at cost price so that everybody has the best advantage. Some of the nurses that recently signed up, because we only released this only a couple of weeks ago, have been, as soon as they signed up, really gone to the top of the list because we know that they're dedicated and committed. And we set a record actually.
Les, last week we had one of our platinum package members join up, and we had an interview and a job offer 15 minutes later.
15 minutes later, that's right. That's leading to permanent residency. Because, well, Frank and Neil are working really, really hard behind the scenes, getting the employers on board. And just in our meeting before, there's a whole heap of positions coming up right now. So those nurses, obviously, that are, further down the track than the rest. I mean, if you've only just done your self-check, well, keep going. That's what our portal does. It allows everybody to, keep track of where you're going and know exactly what you need to do, because you need to know what you need to do. Your steps are in the ABA, and if you're not sure, well, all of the information's on our blogs and on our YouTube channel as well. So make sure you know what that is, because we can't really approve you on the portal if you haven't even done your self-check yet. I mean, at least do that. At least do that so you're your Stream B candidate. Now you know what you need to do. And if you only just joined up, don't expect to get a job offer tomorrow in 15 minutes. I mean, that nurse had already completed the OSCE, so that is very, very attractive. So just make sure you're going through the stages and updating your status there as well. But once you're a member, it's free to join. Obviously, the AusPath portal, there is no cost to join that. But if you decide you want to upgrade, then you'll see the upgrade details inside the members area once you're a member there as well. Just maybe a question for Neil as well, though, with the National Employment Standards, because we did a webinar a couple of weeks ago on CPR training, and then with Will Egan from AusMed as well on the mandatory CPD points. So under the enterprise bargaining agreement, can the nurses or skilled workers, allied health professionals bargain in their agreement that that's time that they need to spend on that mandatory training? Is that something that they can bargain into their enterprise agreement or to the work agreement, or is that something that they have to do on their own time?
Thanks for asking that question, Liz. Thanks for asking the question. If it's a mandatory training, and they've already started work, okay? If they've started work already and it's a mandatory training, that means under Fair Work, they should be paid while doing that training. If it's a mandatory training while they're working. But if they are not working, if it's outside their work, they don't have the contract yet, they don't have the agreement yet, and then they do it, they'll have to pay it on their own. That's why a lot of the caregivers, when I was before with another company, a lot of the caregivers, they don't do their CPR, their first aid, when they are not given a contract, when they have not signed a contract. Once they sign a contract, that's when they do their CPR and their first aid. And when they do it, because it's a mandatory training by law under Fair Work, they're paid while they're doing that course. Yeah, the only difference, Frank, is if they already started. Because if they have not started, or if, for example, because first aid is done every 3 years, CPR is done every year. When they do those trainings under law, they should be paid if they do it in the second or third year.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I was trying to calculate the numbers. I don't know if anyone's ever done this before, but based on the calculations that I did, I actually put it all into open was ChatGPT and tried to calculate all the numbers and things. And it came out and said that basically you got nearly 77.44% off your time is not working in Australia. So it's only about, so it's basically the 80-20 rule. only about 20% of your time's actually working, 80% of it's free time, and you're getting paid all this money and all these holidays and everything. So I guess Australia must be one of the most attractive places in the world to work, I think, with all these extra things that they get, plus the superannuation and all those things, which you can't even calculate into the figures, but you can do the rough numbers, and so yeah.
There's no doubt about it, Frank. There's no doubt about it. If you're from the Philippines, you're an office worker. You usually work 6 days a week up to Saturday. In here in
Yeah.
Australia, it's only 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. So that's what happened to me when I first came in here. I was just so happy. 5 days of work per week, and right now the government, I think the companies are experimenting on 4 days of work per week, not just
Yeah, it's
5 days.
very
Four
attractive.
days. How is that?
Well, that's really very generous for Australia to give these benefits to their employees. And that's why there's a lot of nurses and other even skilled and other professionals who actually choose Australia over other countries because of the benefits that they are getting. And thank you, really, Neil, for the wealth of information that you have provided to our viewers. And if ever that you guys were not able to start on the discussion that on the beginning of this discussion, you can actually see this information as well via the YouTube channel of AUS Path, and you can see the previous discussions that we also were able to provide. You can check the YouTube channel at www.youtube channel. You just search AUS Path Agency. And guys, if you haven't registered for the free membership of AUS Path, then you can go to the www.crm.auspath.agency. And once you have already registered, then you can also join the platinum package, in which that has really a lot of advantages if you are also going to register for the platinum package of AUS Path Agency. TJ has a question in here. TJ, thank you. By the way, to all our viewers, if you have additional questions, we can probably ask for 5 minutes of Neil's 5 minutes to
No
go over the
problem.
questions. I intend to be employed soon as a nurse in Australia. My concern is I am positive with HIV. My condition is controlled and I have been undetected since 2018. How will this affect my employment process with the employment agencies here in the Philippines? And two, when I get to Australia, please advise. Thank you for being very honest, DJ. We appreciate that.
TJ, the most important thing is actually you disclose this information, because the worst thing that can happen is if you don't disclose it. Again, the privacy laws here in Australia, be very assured that the privacy laws here in Australia is really strong. Meaning to say, if you disclose to your employer that you have that, there's no way the employer will tell any other agency or any other company that you have that you are HIV positive. Okay, privacy laws, confidentiality is very strong here in Australia. Now, in the Philippines, I don't know how it is, but for me, the most important thing is the disclosure, because the disclosure, they provide solutions when you disclose. If, for example, I know you cannot be discriminated against because of your medical condition, but then again, it depends on how it will impact your work or the vulnerability of the clients that you are dealing with, especially if you're a nurse. But if you are HIV positive, but um, I don't know, you don't have, you cannot infect anyone anymore. I don't see any problem at all. One of the things that I can tell you, TJ, is that when I was working here as a disability employment consultant, one of my jobs before, I was um, I was handling a client who's got HIV, and he is HIV positive, like HIV positive, and yet he is working, now, just because I know about it, can I tell the employer that he is HIV positive? What I ask him is just to be sure that disclosure from his part should be done, and that he is doing the duty of care to take care of himself, because he has also a duty of care to take care of other people in his work. But you cannot be discriminated against just because you have that. But in saying that, it's a longer process, because you got to go through several checks when you are HIV positive.
Thank you for that response, Neil. How about our other viewers? Do you have other questions that you want it to be addressed by Neil? please send or write here in the comment section if you still have any additional questions or concerns that you think Neil can be able to answer. For those of you who haven't started their NCLEX application while waiting for those who might be interested of provide or asking questions to Neil, your Australian dream starts with getting your OBA pathway done. So you really have to get started on your NCLEX application for Australia, and then move on to your OSCE, and then have your license registration. So AUS PAP has a lot of partners. They are in partnership with IPAS Processing. For the NCLEX processing and review, they have partnership with 9.09er. They have partnership with AUR and Pathway for their OSCE. I can see Frank in there who's back with us. So if you have dreams of going to Australia as a nurse, you really have to go through all of this. So there can be a lot of procedures that you have to undergo, but let's just focus on our goal. Frank, do you have anything that you'd like to say to our audience or to our viewers?
Oh, just to thank Sir Neil again for coming to join us and to sharing in his invaluable knowledge. And again, so for everyone, please, remember again that the AusPath portal is your own personal advertisement to Australian employers. It's free to join, but by all means, once you have joined, seriously consider upgrading to the Platinum package, because it really puts you at an advantage over everybody else there on the portal to get offers of employment via those all-important employer interviews.
Thank you, Neil, for your time. Thank you, Frank, and thank you, Les. And to all our viewers, thank you very much for sharing your precious time with us. And we look forward to seeing you again after 2 weeks on our next discussion. We hope that the information that we have provided today will be very helpful for you as you continue to plan on your Australian dream. And if you need anything, please don't forget to follow the Facebook page of AUS Path Agency. You can check their website, and you can also subscribe to their YouTube channel. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day, everyone. Bye.